Hello, and welcome back to Gunfighter Life. As always, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world, first-hand experience. As always, I am your host, Michael Melito. First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. In addition to that, since we're coming at you from the mobile studio, by we I mean God and myself, and by mobile studio I mean the Hummer driving back from Sedona to Flagstaff. And I guess you could include my Rhodesian Ridgeback Alexander Hamilton, who's riding shotgun. Quick abbreviated bio. Grew up hunting and fishing and shooting fairly poor in the rural South, the United States. Joined the Marine Corps at 17, infantry, did a couple of combat tours, went to war a few times. After that, I went to work for LAPD, worked regular assignments, more specialized assignments. I should say I was also an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. Also served in the U.S. Army full-time and part-time. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify. Worked in the private sector as a gunfighter. Been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. State rifle and pistol champion a few times over. Been a professional big game hunter and guide. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. God has been very good to me in blessing me with talents and skills and experience, and I try and pass those on to you guys. With that being said, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast before we get into today's episode. Alright, if you've listened for a while, you know that sometimes we do a Better Know a Cartridge episode. Today is the 357 SIG. Now, verify everything that I'm telling you, but per the source that I looked up, is developed in 1994, so a relative newcomer, especially when you consider that the 9mm and the 45 are well over 100 years old. 1994, a joint venture between Sig Sauer and Federal. The goal was to duplicate the 357 Magnum in a semi-automatic handgun cartridge that would fit into, your average semi-auto handgun. You can argue whether they did that or not. Short answer is I would say with 125 grain, they get right there with the 357 Magnum. With heavier bullets, your 158s and stuff like that, no, they don't compare. But with the most common defensive load of the time, and probably still today, the 125 grain, you're looking at, depending on the loading, between 1350 and 1450-ish, 100 feet a second, per the load data, and that really depends on your gun and the load and a bunch of other stuff. Now, this likely stems from an era where a lot of people and a lot of police officers believed that the 9mm wasn't enough or wasn't sufficient. A lot of this came out of the 1980s FBI shootout in Miami. You can look that up. If you consider yourself, a connoisseur of gunfighting, you probably should be familiar with that case. It's kind of a turning point in firearms culture in America, especially for law enforcement. Another big one you might want to study would be the LAPD shootout in North Hollywood. But anyway, in the 90s and even into the 2000s, when I was a police officer in Los Angeles, there was a belief that, 9mm was not the best defensive caliber, and that you needed something better. Obviously, the 40 Smith & Wesson, well, not obviously, maybe to you, but the 40 Smith & Wesson was kind of born out of this whole Miami shootout kind of deal. And then later, I believe, came the 357 SIG. And I really can see why the 9mm is the go-to defensive handgun round for law enforcement nowadays, for civilians, and for pretty much everybody around the world. In fact, even when people were saying, when the vast consensus for law enforcement was that the 40 was the best, I went to 45 and then went to 9mm when I actually started realizing that I needed to learn how to shoot, and started shooting competition as a police officer, and realized that most police officers, and this is coming from a former police officer, aren't that good a handgun shooter. They really aren't. The average. There are a few that are. But when I started doing that, I realized that the 9mm really was the go-to and de facto and best choice for a defensive caliber. And again, this was back when most people said you had to have a 40, or, if you were man enough, a 45. And I like the 45. Don't get me wrong. So I get why the 9mm is more popular nowadays. I really do get that. But what I don't get is why, as soon as the 357 SIG came out, why it was not automatically more popular than the 40. You may have a few people out there that really love the 40 and will argue it's the best ballistically, but most people would not argue that the 40 Smith & Wesson is better ballistically than the 357 SIG. And just because of the way that physics works in general, you'll get, let's just call it as effective a round as the 40 Smith & Wesson. I might even argue more so, but let's say at least as effective as the 40 Smith & Wesson, and because of the way physics works, less felt recoil. So, as soon as it came out, why was it not automatically more popular than the 40 Smith & Wesson? Other than just marketing, I really don't know the answer to that. Now, we'll take this to get into a brief aside. For years, I was against red dots, and I know this is completely off topic, but if you follow me, you'll get where I'm going with this. For years, I was completely like, red dots are a niche they'll never catch on. They're like lasers on a pistol. They're just not going to be a thing. And I was wrong about that. And some people I really respected and trained with were switching to red dots. And, despite what I wanted to do, and despite how much I love the romance of being good with iron sights and, being really accurate with iron sights, I was like, I don't want to be a troglodyte. I don't want to be stuck in my ways. I'm going to give this red dot a shot. And for a couple of months, I ran a red dot. And I had to admit, it is better. It is, to put it the best way I can think of, I can get the same quality of shot with an optic on a handgun with much less effort. And if I can do it with less effort, then I can do it faster. And if I can do it faster, I can deliver more shots more accurately in the same amount of time. So, without wanting to cut one of my STIs, because they're really not made anymore, and it kind of seemed like, chopping up an old 1957 Chevy, just didn't seem right. I got a used M17, which is the Army and Marine Corps' new handgun, for a very good price used. I threw a red dot on it and trained with it. And when I decided, my go-to all-around handgun is going to have an optic, put a Trijicon RMR on that one. And then I was on the hunt because I like single action only. I'm a 1911 guy. I like single action only handguns on one-on-one cut for a red dot. That was light enough that I could carry all the time without being a nuisance, meaning I wouldn't switch to something else so it was lighter. But big enough to be a good, shootable, all-around handgun. And I really wanted a couple other options. I really wanted a lightweight 1911 cut for red dot, but I really couldn't find any. Then I wanted a Beretta single action. The only problem is those are made with a steel frame and far too heavy for what I was willing to carry day to day. So, long story short, I settled on the SIG 226, and I had it cut for a red dot. And most 226s are double action, single action. But like I said, I wanted a single action only. The only one that I could find anywhere was a used 40 Smith & Wesson that came with a 357 SIG barrel. It was a good price. I bought it. I spent $125 getting the slide cut out for a red dot so I could mount a Trijicon on it. I have been training and I have been running it. When I first got it, I thought, I have quite a bit of experience with a 40 from back in the day. I'll just run it with a 40. And I already had budgeted in that I was going to buy the 9mm conversion barrel from Barstow Precision. And I'm still waiting on the barrel. They're quite a bit back-ordered. They're a good product. I don't mind waiting. But I figured while they were around, I'd run it in a 40. And I thought, since I have the barrel, I might as well buy a box of 357 SIG. Well, I shot them both, and I really do think the 357 SIG is better. So I bought a few more boxes of ammo, and I've been carrying it with the 357 SIG and training in the 357 SIG. A little funny side note, if you guys know and have listened for a while, my wife's name is Christy. I have a really nice high-end STI and 9mm that's really gentle, really sweet shooting gun, and that gun's name is Christy. Well, this gun's name is Angry Christy. It's super loud, super kind of obnoxious to shoot and hard to hold on to, so I named it Angry Christy, which she got a kick out of, and I think people that know me and know her get a kick out of. So Angry Christy I've been training with, and I really have to admit that I like it more in the 357 than I do in the 40. I had forgotten just how snappy the 40 Smith & Wesson is. And I don't care how good you control recoil, if you reduce it, you control it better. So with that being said...
2 miles.
And so I've been running this 357 SIG 6-hour P226 single action only, and I really like it, I have to admit. Despite the bark of this thing, the loud noise, it's a good gun. It's accurate. And the other day I got off work and needed to take the dog out for a run. Had just enough daylight to do that, get that done, and went right out. Same thing I normally do when I go hiking. I took my same EDC everyday carry gear, which included the SIG 226, and I was on a dirt road in the National Forest taking the dogs for a run, and up jumps a coyote. Pretty easy shot right in front of me, and I didn't shoot it at first because I saw a truck in the distance and I really wasn't sure if it was somebody else's dog or not. It sure looked like a coyote, but it could have been a freaking Malinois for all I know, with pointy ears and skinny. But I watched it and I saw it run, and I've hunted enough coyotes to, after that, pretty instinctively know that that was a coyote. Well, now it wasn't such an easy shot, and I didn't measure this out, but let's say for argument's sake, I don't want to be the guy that overestimates everything, but let's say he was 75 yards away running. And I grabbed the gun out of the holster and put the green triangle on the target, on the coyote, squeeze trigger, boom, coyote folds over. It was a very blessed day. And I ran up to where the coyote went down, and I put another round in him just from being a professional hunter and guide. If I can get another round in something, I will. It was still flopping around, which doesn't mean it wasn't a good shot. In fact, I think it was a very good shot. You can see the pictures of that if you want. But still, like I said, from practice, if I can get another round in something, I put another round in something. And that was a blessed day, and that was kind of a bonding moment for me in that gun. And if you've ever run like a training class with a gun or been through a war with a gun or anything like that, there are times when you bond with a gun. And I really bonded with this one. I'm very blessed to have this gun, and it's nice when all the research and everything comes together. All the research, finding the gun that would fit the reason that I wanted it, one that would shoot well for me with a good trigger, but still a good defensive trigger. It's a factory SIG trigger, defensive trigger. Had it specifically cut for the RMR so I could mount the optic right onto it. No optics plate, no extra stuff. To me, simpler is better. It just has screws that bolt right into the slide of the gun. And in that moment, when that all came together and I was blessed by God with those talents and that opportunity to take that coyote, that was a good day. And that really kind of showed me how good that gun could be and its potential, and the potential of the 357 SIG. So if you listen to that whole thing, kind of makes sense now with the 357 SIG. Shooting a running coyote at 75 yards with a semi-automatic handgun. And you could do that with a 9mm. I've hunted plenty with a 9mm. But it was nice to have that extra little oomph for that 357 SIG. Which brings me to, do I think that this gun, that the 357 SIG rather, should supplant, the 9mm as the go-to defensive handgun cartridge? No, I don't. And for most people, for most things, I think the 9mm is better. I still think the 9mm is the best defensive handgun. But I think that the 357 SIG does fill a niche. If you mostly live in a rural area. If you're a rancher that's out riding fences, as a professional hunter and guide, part of my job was managing a ranch, and a lot of that job was out riding fences, literally, where dispatching coyotes was part of my job, where large angry animals in the rut are an actual thing. For that situation, would I rather have a 357 SIG? Yeah, I would. In fact, when I was doing that, my go-to sidearm was a 357 Magnum, which I've talked about in older episodes. And like I said, with the 125 grain, if you choose one of the loads that's pushing at 1450 feet a second, that gets you pretty well into the 357 Magnum category. So is it the best defensive caliber for everybody? Do I think everybody should switch? No, I don't. But I think it does fill a niche, and I think it fills those niches well, especially if you were just going to carry a handgun and you were going to be out scouting or something like that, and your primary job wasn't to hunt, but you had your pig tag. There's pigs where you're out scouting, and if you got a good shot on a good pig, you would take it because you don't want them on your property or whatnot. Or you live in the borderlands of America with the Mexican drug cartels and everything, and you don't want to carry a long gun all the time, but you want to be out there and you want to be safe, and you might get into a longer range confrontation and all you have is a handgun. That might be a niche that would be well suited to the 357 SIG. Likewise, if you like handgun hunting for the challenge, which I do, and you're mostly going to hunt, but you just want to carry the same thing all the time, again, that might be a niche for the 357 SIG. If you're just going to handgun hunt, it'd be hard to argue with just having a good revolver. But, if you wanted a dual-purpose gun leaning more towards hunting, but you wanted it also for when you went into town and you didn't want to have to switch all your stuff around, good choice. And one of the other big advantages, and this is per the source that I looked up, the Accurate Powder Reloading Manual apparently says that it's the most consistent, which should translate to most accurate handgun cartridge they've tested. There's so many factors that play into that. I'm not going to say whether that's true or not, but mine certainly seemed accurate, and that is not super scientifical. Also, because it's a bottleneck shape, if you look at it, it looks like a little baby chubby rifle round. It should, in theory, and from what I hear, it does help with extraction problems, meaning it should extract fairly easily because it's a tapered bottleneck case. So a lot of times in handguns, extraction issues are a cause of malfunctions. This should make that less of a thing. One of the big issues with this round, why I would not recommend it, is economy of scale, just simply cost. This round costs quite a bit more than 9mm. Which means unless you have an unlimited blue sky budget, which most of us don't for shooting, let's say my ammo budget is $100 a month. I can practice far more with a 22 than with a 9, and I can practice far more with a 9mm than I can with a 357 SIG. I'd rather have somebody that practiced 300 draws, good solid draws, and getting hits on target, doing that 300 times with a 9mm than somebody doing it 100 times with a 357 SIG. And for those two big reasons, I don't think that the 9mm is in any worry of getting knocked out of first place, nor would I do that. I think the 9mm, as I said, is the best defensive handgun cartridge. And I came to that opinion on my own long before that was the consensus, long before that was the popular opinion, just from real-world first-hand experience. But again, I think that the 357 does fill a niche and can fill a niche. That being said, when I get my 9mm precision barrel from Barstow for this thing, I'm going to run both and see. There may come times when I'm out hiking in bear country and pig country on the border where I take the 357 SIG, but I don't know that I would make it my go-to caliber for defense. With that, let's get nerdy on the ballistics there, gunfighters. Now, I quote usually the Hornady Reloading Manual, but since I started this in the mobile studio, I did pull up some Wikipedia, so take that for what it's worth and what it lists. But let's look at some of the things here. And like I said, there's a little bit of variation, but let's say the most common load is 125 grains. Winchester Ranger T, which is like one of the definitive go-to defensive handgun loads, is launching 125 grain at $13.85. And then Federal Premium, jacketed hollow point, 125 grain at $14.30. And your Spear Gold Dot, another iconic one, 1385 foot-pound or 1385 feet a second. And then Underwood launching a Spear Gold Dot at 1450. And since I am home, we will go to the Hornady Reloading Manual, which is a good manual. You hear me quote it often, but it is not known for super hot loads. They kind of, in my opinion, play it pretty conservative as far as the loading data goes. But if we look at the load data for the 9mm Luger and 124 grain versus 125 grain, you got 1 grain of difference there. But you're looking at, 1050 to 1150. And if you look at the 115 grain, you're looking at, 1250 with a lighter bullet. And I flipped over to the same 124 grain bullet listed in the Hornady Reloading Manual, probably because they're both Hornady bullets. And it's listing that at 1350. And again, factory loads push that up a little bit hotter. And let's say for argument's sake, there's a lot of 9mm loads, but let's say for argument's sake, you're pushing around 350, 400-ish foot-pounds of energy, which I don't put a lot of stock in, but it is a way to look at it. And with the 357 SIG, you are doing in the neighborhood of foot-pounds, let's see, 500, 580s, somewhere in that range for the foot-pounds of energy. Let's say one of the hotter loads, the Underwood, for 583 foot-pounds. So that's not like a marginal gain. That's not like a plus P loading. That's a different cartridge. It certainly gives you higher velocity with a given weight bullet and more foot-pounds. Whether that really translates in real world, I think that controllability and getting multiple shots on target quickly, I don't care how good a handgun cartridge it is. In general, handgun cartridges are not great at stopping people. And that includes one of my all-time favorites, the 357 Magnum, and by that, the 357 SIG. They may do a little bit better, but I would not count on them for like one-shot stops. That's not a thing for handguns that you normally would count on. And like we said earlier with the 40 and the 357 SIG, I don't care how good you control recoil. I don't say this to brag. I'm a state pistol champion a few times over. A lot of that is speed shooting, so I know a thing or two about controlling recoil. I don't care how good I can control it. If I reduce it, I control it better. And I think getting multiple fast, accurate hits on target is more important. There are certain situations where that doesn't make as big a difference. If I'm shooting a long range, the time it takes me to acquire and line up and get ready for the shot, that time's going to be eaten up anyway. If I'm hunting with it and I shoot and I have to shoot again, that animal very likely has moved. And so I have to reacquire that animal and get my sights back on target. By that time, I've long since recovered from the recoil. If I'm doing a bill drill, which is 6 shots center mass as fast as I can at 3 yards, then, that really does make a difference. So it really depends. So, think about it, consider it, and if anything else, at least you better know a cartridge now, the 357 SIG. Thanks for listening. As a thank you for staying tuned, tactical tip of the day. A lot of us gunfighters and concealed carriers, we carry an extra magazine pouch on our belt. One thing you can do that I have in my spare magazine pouch, I have 2 things in there. One is a set of earplugs, which really comes in handy because anytime I'm out with my gun, if I want to do some practicing or whatever, I have ears. And I generally have sunglasses or a pair of yellow aviators or whatnot. But I have earplugs in there. And this especially comes useful with the 357 SIG because, like I said, she's got a bark. She's a noisy girl. If I hadn't had earplugs, I think I would have just let that coyote go. It's not worth it to my ears. But I did have them, and I threw them in real quick. Why? Because they're in my spare magazine pouch. And when I was trying to decide whether that was somebody's dog or a coyote, those earplugs went in. So a spare pair of earplugs in your magazine pouch, your spare mag pouch, also a thing I like too. And be careful with this and test it and make sure it doesn't get caught in your magazine. But I've talked about micro cord is basically baby 550 cord. 550 cord is good for a lot of stuff. Micro cord is good for some things, and it does some things better than 550 cord. I carry a piece of micro cord a few inches longer than my barrel with a loop knot in one end, so that if I do get my barrel dirty or nasty or something like that, drop it in the sand, I can just take a piece of cloth, rip off a piece of shirt, cut off a piece of my sock, a paper towel, whatever, and pull it through there to clean out the barrel of my pistol. So that's the tactical tip of the day. Tactical verse of the day, and I'm sure I've said this more than once, but you're going to get it again. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. With that, gunfighters, I'm going to say thanks for listening. Have a blessed day. Don't forget to check out goodshepherdtraining.com. I don't know that I've uploaded any pictures of that coyote. I think I did, but only for the patrons. So if you want to see that, you can become a patron if you want to support this message. Pictures of me and that coyote. Now, pictures of a bunch of other pictures on there. Practical shooting drills that you can do. A lot of other things. But most of all, support on Patreon if you like the message and you think that you want other men to hear it. You want it to be out there and get out there. If you think this content was worth $1, like less than one round of 357 SIG, you can support the message, support the tribe that you're now a part of. Again, goodshepherdtraining.com. There's a Patreon link right on there. Also some cool merchandise if you want, a cool manly cup to cook your coffee over a fire in or things like that. Good shooting shirt. I probably don't mention that enough. Anyway, with that, men, if you have it in your heart to give, give. And if not, don't, and don't feel guilty about it. My God supplies all my needs. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.